Hello, my name is Mr. Alvin Deng, and today I'm going to be going through a very common and popular type of question in thinking skills called the truths and lies question type. Now, as the name suggests, in this type of question, you'll be provided with a number of statements. Now, the trick in this question is you don't know if those statements are telling the truth or whether they're lying. Now, the conditions of the question varies amongst different types, but at the end of the day, the main trick is you figuring out which one is lying, which one's telling the truth, and what conclusion can you draw from that. Right here are two example questions I pulled. The first one here from the sample selective thinking skills paper, quite famous question. And the second question here was from last year's selective thinking skills paper. Both questions give a number of statements, and you are not sure whether they're telling the truth or lying, and you have to figure that out yourself, given the clues and the information provided. Now, with these types of questions, there is a trick that I teach all my students that is extremely powerful. Actually, there's three tricks. When you come to face with these types of questions, at the end of the day, there is a good chance that you're going to have to do some sort of guess and check. Now, you're going to want to do that, but you're going to want to guess and check with strategy, with logic. You don't want to be doing it blindly because that's how you waste time and that's how you end up repeating the question. So what kind of strategy do we have? Well, when we come to these questions, first thing we do is we skim over each statement and we look for three things. Look for three things. The number one thing I look for first are statements that contradict each other. Contradict means saying opposite things. For example, in question 29 over here, Darren is saying Bobby is guilty, and Bobby is saying I am not guilty. Those two are what we call contradicting statements because their meanings do not work together. They go against each other. The second thing I look for when I come across these types of questions are statements that say the same thing as each other. Right? So two statements that basically have the same meaning. For example, if we look at this sample question from the selective thinking skills paper, let's have a look. Room 1 says, I am not in this room. Room 3, one of the statements says, I am not in room 1. These two statements would be saying the same thing because they're both trying to say that they're not in room 1. These are statements that say the same thing as each other, and they're a good thing to look out for. The third thing I would suggest all students look out for are statements that talk about other statements or speakers that talk about another speaker. For example, if there are three speakers and one speaker calls the second one a liar, that's a very good thing to start looking at. That's a very good statement that should catch your eye. And I'll explain the importance and the powerfulness of all three things. Let's set up a scenario. Let's say you're given a question where there are four speakers. There's speaker A, speaker B, speaker C, and speaker D. They each make a statement, and let's say that one of the speakers are lying. So one out of the four. Now, let's say, just for example, that speaker 1 and 3 are contradicting each other, meaning they're saying opposite things. If speaker 1 and 3 are saying opposite things, then that means only one of them can be telling the truth. Now, if only one person between A and C can be telling the truth and the other person must be lying, that means that the liar is between A and C. The implications of that is that if there's only one liar and the liar is between A and C, that means B and D, we can automatically conclude that they must be telling the truth. And the liar is just between A and C. So right off the bat, just by reading through the question and using our strategy, we can figure out two pieces of information that will help us find the answer. Now, let's say that instead of A and C contradicting each other, let's say that they say the same thing as each other. If A and C have the same meaning, that means A and C must either both be true or they're both false, right? It's either one or the other. Now, if A and C must be both be true or both be false, and we know that there's only one liar, that means A and C can't both be liars, meaning the only alternative is that A and C are both telling the truth. And bam, again, without really, diving into the working out, without really using any guess and check, just by using our strategy, we can figure out that A and C must both be telling the truth, meaning the liar must be between B and D. And that's the powerfulness, that's the power of looking for statements that say the same thing. Now, let's say that there aren't contradicting statements and there aren't statements that say the same thing, but instead their statements are talking about each other. Let's say A is accusing B of something, speaker B is accusing speaker D, and speaker D is accusing speaker C, and speaker C is just talking about him or herself. In this type of question, you're going to want to know what order that the speakers accuse each other in. The reason why we want to do this is because we have to use guess and check, and we don't want to guess and check at any speaker. We want to guess and check at the beginning of the accusation. Right? Who was the first person to accuse someone else? That's where we want to start our guess and check with. In this case, that would be speaker A. If we guess and check speaker A, that would tell us something about speaker B, who tells us something about speaker D, who tells us something about speaker C. Basically, with one guess, we figure out 4 things. That's called efficiency, and that's what thinking skills is all about. Now, let's actually employ this strategy in a question. All right, let's use it in question 29 from last year's selective thinking skills paper. So reading through the questions, there are 3 men, Arthur, Bobby, and Darren, and they are the suspects in a crime investigation. Only one man is guilty. So maybe I'll underline this just to keep track of it. When they are questioned, they give the following statements. Darren says Bobby is guilty. Bobby says I am not guilty. Arthur says I am not guilty. However, only one of the 3 men is telling the truth. There are 2 of them are lying. That's a very important piece of information. 1 truth teller, 2 liars. And the question is asking which one of the following statements must be true. So in this case, we have to figure out who's guilty, who's lying, and who's telling the truth before we find the answer. Now, this is a truth and lie question. So let's use our truth and lie strategy. Let's look for contradicting statements. I'm reading through the 3 people, and straight off the bat, Darren and Bobby are contradicting each other. Darren is accusing Bobby of being guilty, and Bobby is saying, I am not guilty. Now, they're saying opposite things, so that means one of them must be telling the truth, and one of them must be lying. Now, if we know one of them's telling the truth, and one of them's lying, that means the truth teller, the singular truth teller, must be between Darren and Bobby. That means we can automatically conclude that Arthur can't be the one telling the truth, and Arthur, therefore, must be lying. Right? Using our strategy, using just a bit of logic, we can figure out this piece of information. If Arthur's lying, that means Arthur is not guilty. Now, if Arthur's not guilty, that means Arthur is guilty. My apologies. So I'm not guilty. If that's false, then that means Arthur is guilty. So we can cross off option C. If Arthur's guilty, then Bobby can't be guilty because there can only be one guilty man. Now, if Bobby's not guilty, that means Darren's lying and Bobby is telling the truth. Okay, now we figured out that Arthur is guilty and we figured out who's telling the truth and who's lying. That should be able to give us our answer. Let's see. Darren is guilty. No. Bobby is lying. No. Darren is lying. That's the answer. There it is. So as you can see, this question here is supposed to take us around a minute. That's how thinking skills is usually designed. But using our strategy, we'd figured out very efficiently who was guilty, therefore who's telling the truth, and therefore which one was our answer. And we did that in under a minute, which is what we should be aiming for. So that's it for this lesson, this short lesson. If you ever come across a truth and lie type of question, look for these three things and start your guess and check with those three things. Other than that, I'll see you guys next time.